Hello, and welcome to House Music, the interview series about live music and placemaking. My name is Mark Benham. I'm head of real estate at Leicester Aldridge, and I advise house builders on development. But outside of work, my passion is music. There's a clear synergy between community assets, including live music venues, and the creation of new housing. The government's chief planner, Joanna Averley, has reminded planning authorities that they have an important role in identifying and protecting local grassroots music venues in their area from the effects of development. She also flagged how the Music Venue Trust can offer support to planning authorities when consulting on applications. Current data shows that 2 grassroots venues are closing every month across the UK. Without government support, reality is that the number of venues will continue to shrink. My guest today is Muyiwa Oki, architect and former president of the RIBA. Not only that, but he is both the youngest ever president and the first Black president in its near 200-year history. Muyi, welcome to House Music.
Hello, Mark. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and I love the title, House Music. It's a double entendre, isn't it?
Absolutely. Great. Well, let's get started and get straight into music if we could. So I'm interested in your earliest memories of music from when you were growing up in Lagos and in London.
So I think if my very, very, very early moment of music outside of Barney, which is the TV show, the cartoon TV show, it was like that told you your ABCs and Sesame Street and stuff like that. Outside of that, I would say my mom, I think she raised us in the diet of a smattering of, the 80s power ballad music. So people like Yvonne Shaka Shaka, the South African, I don't know what genre that would be. Sort of like Afro pop music,
Okay.
Afro pop music. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yvonne Shaka Shaka, Shaka Khan, Angela Kidjo. So lots of women singing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was my earliest memory of like music outside of like Sesame Street or the Barney series.
Great. So that sort of framed your musical journey and the music that you now love. And
Yes.
what's the first concert or gig you remember going to, and what's the most recent?
Oh, I don't even remember. Do I remember the first one, first one? I mean, I can remember the first one that I paid to go to, but the most recent one I've been to was, again, it's an African, Nigerian artist. They're called the Cavemen, and they really blew up, I think, the last few years. They're from southeast Nigeria, Igbo. I think most of them in the band are Igbo, and they do this sort of, how do I describe their music? It is like R&B with a very particular Igbo twang to it. So it's very much Igbo music, modern Igbo music,
Okay.
but R&B. It's kind of cool, very cool. You wouldn't expect, especially how like Afro beats in general has become a thing. I wouldn't have expected to see Afrobeats music modernized, because after the even Shaka Shakas and such, I moved on to Fela Kuti, which is like, it's the fundamentals of like African music. You have to listen to Fela Kuti, and it was very political, and it was saying something about society then, and he always said stuff like, music is, he said music is power or something like that, and then now still has power, but it is sort of morphed and changed into the genres that were readily available and readily associate with, which is kind of cool. That morphology of music is interesting to see.
Yes, I mean, he was a real innovator, wasn't he? And in terms of how he fused the genres. And I've seen Caveman described as high life fusion.
Yeah.
So to tell me about high life music, and did that form part of your sort of formative years as well?
Yes, because I think Fela early Fela music was high life. And I remember watching the documentary about him and his life and how tragic it all ended. There was a material change. I think it was like late 60s, early 70s. And it was to do with the mixture of civil rights movement in the US, the apartheid in South
Mm.
Africa, and basically he couldn't continue writing about women. And there's one of my favorite songs of his. It's about soup, his favorite soup, Nigerian soup. And yeah, it sounds frivolous, and it probably did sound frivolous back in those days when it's like, well, there's there is some civil issues, civil unrest associated with the African diaspora, and you're singing about soup. It doesn't quite connect. So he there was that significant material shift to talk about the issues of the day because Nigeria wasn't insulated from all that. We were becoming this one of our first republics, and there was all this political unrest as well.
Yeah,
So the music had to reflect the time.
absolutely. So if you were to choose a headline act at your perfect concert, dead or alive, and also a supporting act, who would those acts be, and whereabouts would you hold that concert?
Ooh, it's a tough one, and I have to think. I think I'm gonna because I'm human. I'm gonna do recency bias, and I'm gonna go with two, maybe three artists. Maybe we can have double two people headline support the headline. I would say Bad Bunny. Yeah, because I recently I until about February this year, whenever he did the Super Bowl halftime show, I had not
Yeah,
I did not know this man. I couldn't pick him up from a lineup before, but the show was very captivating, and now I have on repeat DTMF, which is the last song that he played on repeat, and which are really like sort of high life-ish reggaeton songs.
right.
So I have him as a headline, and and then to support him, this is because this is hypothetical. It doesn't really go, but I will have two people. One of my friends, Robert Spalanis, who does some sort of avant-garde classical music with the violin and viola,
Hmm.
and perhaps Nicholas Brittle, the composer, who does. I mean, he did the lots of theme songs and theme musics to, for example, Succession. The
Right.
guy did
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Succession. But anyway, he did one for a movie called If Bill Street Could Talk. It's a black movie, and this particular song, Agape, it's like 2 minutes long, and it's lots of flutes and wind instruments, and it's just beautiful. Anytime I listen to it, it's just it speaks to me.
And whereabouts would you hold the concert? What would be your perfect venue?
Hmm. Right. I don't know, you know. I don't well the O2 is like I think I've always loved the O2 because it had two different um stages. Because off the top of my head, I just say O2 because it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I've only been there when it was the Millennium Dome. I've not actually been in it since it's been transformed.
To do it, yeah. Because I think O2 because for quite a long time, especially when we moved as a family over to London, my conception of London or my idea or the logo of London for me was the Millennium Dome.
Really?
I
Ah,
don't know.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know,
Also than
maybe
Tower Bridge or the Houses of Parliament or similar.
more so than double that.
Interesting.
And I only just realized, I mean, not just, when it came to realize that it was, very early, like it was a 2000 project in the new millennium. And I was like, oh, I thought it would have been there for a while. But that was my idea of
Yeah.
London because it was new as well. I didn't know that as a kid.
Yeah.
I just thought that was cool.
Yeah.
With the yellow spikes coming out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you've spoken in the past about your love of Nina Simone and also Benjamin Clementine. So I'm interested to know what draws you to their music.
Oh, we'd be here for hours. I think I for Benjamin Clementine, let me start with Benjamin. He his voice is just so different to anything I have personally heard. And again, the fact that it's he's not classically trained or trained in any music at all, and it feels so raw and authentic. And I love the way in which he writes music. I don't know whether the music comes before the lyrics or the lyrics come before the music,
Mm.
but it feels like he's writing poetry and poetry to music and writing music to poetry. So the poetry is already written and the music comes after. But the fact that he can elongate stanzas and reduce them, and it's so simple and so moving. I think part of the music I love, similar to what Fela says about music needs to have an attitude, it has to have power. That is what the power that the music has to change your mood, whether they're feeling content or despondent or what have you. That's what I like about music, and that's what I love about Benjamin. And it's quite similar to Nina Simone. Her voice is you can pick it out. I think you can pick it out in a couple of seconds, and that's so it's non-fungible. How about that? That's a good technical term. Non-fungible sound, non-fungible voice, which is what I really love about those two artists.
Because again, they're also innovators in so many ways, and their expression, that sort of socio-political expression that they have, and like you say, the raw energy and so expressive. Yeah, almost like a sort of sermon-like delivery when they perform. I can
Yes.
see a real similarity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still remember the first time I saw Benjamin Clementine on TV, and I was blown away by his energy. It was absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So much so. And they both play the piano, and sometimes it can just be stripped back to voice and piano, and
Yeah,
it's as powerful as a recorded track.
absolutely. So what I'd like to do now is move into more music and architecture and how they interact. So I'm interested to know, in terms of your personal connection to music and how that has influenced how you think about space or community, and also you've lived in some really interesting and iconic places: Lagos, London, Sheffield, and Birmingham. And I'm interested to know how they have influenced your work.
In multiple ways. I haven't been very specific about it since being in professional practice. I think Lagos is one of the big. They have lots of cultural venues, and one of the big cultural venues is the New African Shrine, which was set up by Fela Kuti. It's other offshoots and other venues like cultural venues like that have a blueprint based on that. Um, and then London, when you talk about O2, the old Millennium Dome, I love that place because it's a little bit of a pilgrimage as well, especially from where I live in South London, to get there, and you feel like you're going to watch a football match, anyway you sort of march over there. And more recently, I sort of navigate music through the RA guide. I don't know if you know about it. I can't remember what it's called, what the full name or what RA stands for, but it's this app that tells you what's going on, and they put me onto things that are happening in Jazz Cafe and such, and other places. But in a very particular way, music had a impact on, or was a basis for which I started my last final year dissertation at university. And I think we talked about this when we were briefing. It was this idea from this French philosopher, Jacques Attali, who wrote about noise, basically, which is organized, or music, which is noise, which is organized noise, and how it has an impact on the political economy, right? And
Right.
let me try to unpack this. So, and the central thesis of music in his work was first that music, like I said, is organized noise, and every society, the way in which you organize this noise mirrors implicitly the economy, and he goes some way to say it actually predicts how the economy will operate. And instead of it lagging behind history or society, it actually runs ahead of it. And if you sort of carefully look at how society manages music, you'll hear the future of how it sort of manages people and, more importantly, capital. And if you think about the example of the rise of the shuffle, the iPod shuffle, and how we shuffle music and then stream music, when the iPod shuffle came out, we discarded, by and large, the album. It changed how we think about owning things fundamentally. And instead of buying an entire album, we bought single pieces of music. And you can then see how that has sort of bled into an influenced work. Instead of having a steady job, you are bought for particular hours. And you can see it in your delivery drivers, your Uber drivers. So you're bought for a project. You don't own the song like you used to, like now, because you stream, you get access to the music, similar to how you get access to the job until capital takes it away from you. So what he said was like music figures things out first because it's simple and easy and light and culturally central to our lives. So if you think about how music is organized or noise, you can sort of predict how the economy and capital is organized.
Those are interesting concepts. Really interesting. And in fact, that leads me on to the idea of a 15-minute city that you may have come across. And that idea is that everyone lives within 15 minutes of a walk or a bike ride from basic services. Do you think that there could be a concept of a 15-minute music city? Could that ever become a reality?
Yeah, I think so. And I think in cities like London, where there's a higher threshold or higher supply of like good transit systems, it means that you're not too far away from a cultural station, as it were. And so therefore it's more of an integrated planning problem than it is just a pure, well, or housing issue. Like, or you have to think about, think about the layers. So you do the outdoor spaces, the cultural space, or the livable spaces, the cultural spaces, and the transport infrastructure that goes to join the dots. And until cities outside of London do that, will we will continue to have these sort of like disparate bifurcation of cities where, oh yeah, we'll have this is something cluster and the other cluster and the other cluster. More by and large, similar to how, our forefathers lived. They lived in a commune close to all the different skill sets that could help you live and sustain your life.
But I'm interested in how some cities seem to have this sort of musical identity. So when I think of those sorts of cities, I think of Brighton, Sheffield, Manchester, Bristol, Lagos as well has a great musical heritage. What sort of architectural lessons do you think could be learnt from those cities? And I'm interested in how you link the infrastructure to the cultural success almost.
I think all those happen, especially Bristol and Brighton. There is an element of walkability to them. And if you're in a neighborhood, you can walk around the neighborhood. Lagos less so because it's still very much modeled on the American dream. So the car, it remains prevalent. But the ones that work and the ones that we love, especially in the Western Hemisphere, there is that element of walkability. And the whole concept of 15-minute cities, I think if I remember correctly, is an urbanist, Carlos Moreno, who developed the concept. And it's that idea of you should be able to walk 15 minutes to something so that you get to enjoy life a little bit fluidly. And that's what that then encourage you to stop and linger. And therefore, I'll put something like a DJ booth and just create an atmosphere. And therefore, people can walk past and there'll be footfall to it to support the activation of said space.
And I think that's probably directly relevant to the current review of high streets and how high streets have changed over the last 10 or so years. And what role do you think cultural spaces, music venues, grassroots music venues in particular, and housing can play in rejuvenating our failing high streets?
I think, music is super important. Music in cultural spaces is super important in the high street, especially now that we don't need shops anymore, or we need less foot space, floor area for shops, because they do this mixed mode of online and offline. Basically, shops are like showrooms, if you want, for one lack of a better word. So we then need to understand, like, what else do we want to go outside? We want to see each other. We want to enjoy each other's company. And what encourages us to enjoy each other's company and see each other? It's the activation of space. It's music. It's art. It's culture. And I forgot. I kind of forgot the question, but I think it is super important that we really try to, especially when we're building big housing complex, to encourage a mix of programs, especially on the ground floor. And when I talk about mixed programs, I don't just mean another Sainsbury's or a Lidl in the ground floor shop area. It is, an art venue. It is a music venue. It is a creche or something. It does multiple functions outside of what it was initially intended to do. And there's a good example of that, and I kind of forget it. It was this housing development in East London. It was nominated recently for the RIBA Sterling Prize, and it was a housing development for artists, and I think that's the name of the project, House for Artists. Right. And it was we worked with the local Newham Council to subsidize the rent of artists, so that then they could use the ground floor and activate it for the good of the community. And I think it's those sort of clever ways of thinking about how we can use space and mix the programming of the space for the benefit use value benefit of the communities.
And to incentivize creativity by the sounds of it as well, by encouraging artists into that space.
Yeah, for sure. And then when it becomes a cultural destination, people will travel to be there, and it creates a sense of community, sense of life.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to talk a bit more about architecture specifically, perhaps moving slightly away from music. AI. There's a lot of talk in the legal profession about AI and the impact on the provision of legal services going forward. And I'm sure there are similar conversations in architecture at the moment.
Sure.
How do you see automation, digital tools, and AI sort of reshaping architectural practice over the coming years?
Like everyone, we are really trying to grapple with the benefits and the issues that will be raised by AI. And I lump AI with automation and then digital tools in general because they are not one and the same, but they have interdependencies and relational links. But I do think the way in which it will shape or reshape professions at large, and the architecture profession in particular, is how we process judgment. I think at the earliest stage that we are in, we need to be able to codify in a way which how we judge things, how we make decisions at various decision gates. Sort of routine work like clash detections in a drawing, or writing specification, or doing some modeling when it comes to like predicting the future and sort of like carbon modeling and such, needs to be, I think will be more and more absorbed by AI in the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that is a threat to the profession at all. I think that's probably good. I believe it will be better because if I think about it in logical in an analogy, it is similar to what the steam engine kind of did for physical labor. It meant that people didn't have to toil too much to move from A to B or to work big machinery. I think we'll have to spend and toil too much to do what is relatively simple, which is finding if clash, for example, clash detection, finding if beam A and column A meet or don't meet. So that's a good thing. So what I will then do will open up the bigger decision making judgment calls, like, do we want to work for this company with this company, or that, or not this company? Do we want to have it this building tall, or should we create some more space for communities and culture on the ground floor, or not? So the risk I see is not that AI does too much, but that it gets trained to do things that we haven't mastered the judgment of yet. So we need to first of all codify how we make decisions about clash detection and tell it to do all that boring stuff, and then keep the more juicy, intelligent, high order thinking for ourselves.
And what do you think architecture students, when they look at the impact of technology on their role and their ability to learn from experience, do you think they're worried about how that might impact their development?
Yeah, I do think so. And like I said, I just came from a talk at the UCL Bartlett. There is that sense of uncertainty about what do I do now? And it's incumbent. This is why it's incumbent on our leaders, and, national and local leaders, to encourage the economy to move away from this sort of like exchange value where things are commodified. Like I was saying with Jacques Attali and noise and music, you're commodifying jobs and you're basically just exchanging someone's time for money, and move towards a more use value. And I use the example of housing. The talk about housing more and more, especially as someone in the industry, is as an asset class to be commoditized. And we're still not solving the housing issue. Same things with jobs and entry level jobs. Jobs isn't a commodity to be exchanged for just for money. We need to have a balance between jobs as something useful to educate each other, to create community around, to challenge ourselves and the way we think, so that we're not put into silos. And it's incumbent on our leaders globally and in the UK to organize work in that way, and create the incentives for creating work in that way, as opposed to just a mere commodity to be exchanged.
I'm interested also to talk about your role as an architect, because you've talked about architects being public servants and problem solvers. And also you've talked about how social and community influence is really important on a modern architect. How difficult is it to balance these in the context of commercial considerations and client instructions?
It is very difficult. It's very, very difficult. And it is, especially for public sector work, we do need a public sector that leads the way in having a mission driven, what's the word, like goals, as outside of admissions can include the commercial aspect, but also we want to be able to measure, and something that I try to organize a roundtable for. So like, how do we measure a good design, as it were? What the metrics, and also it was obviously not going to be a good. It's not going to be a direct ROI. You put this amount of money into a public project, and therefore you get more money back because of tax receipts and whatnot. So therefore, that's a good design. But I think that conversation needs to be had, just because in more and more parts of our lives, that this idea of life, every part of our life is a commodity that needs to be exchanged for money. That's a sort of zero sum game. And I think we, especially architecture, was one of the reasons I really enjoy architecture. Architecture is about how do we enjoy life a little bit more than we would in standard space.
That's interesting. You've spoken about underrepresented students and people entering the profession. What advice would you give to them looking to enter architecture?
Well, my advice would be to, first and foremost, understand what your strengths are and really lean into them for, the first few years of your career. Try to collect as much. And then, and once you understand what you give back, some ways, what your usefulness is, then start collecting more. So like you sort of banking, like Super Mario, basically, like banking all these coins of like, I came up with an architecture degree, and now I'm gonna be a little bit more attuned to project management, and I'll use that with my architecture degree to, do projects that are less architecture friendly and try to influence that through my awareness of good design and architecture. And so therefore, okay, now I've done that, maybe I want to do a little, I'm interested in planning or planning law work in local government so that I can influence the brief that comes down the line to create neighborhoods. And that is the sort of, I kind of call it a spider web of a career. Think about your career less of a ladder and more of a spider web. And like Super Mario, collect the different coins to create more a fuller web of links and interests.
Yeah. So in terms of the RIBA's role, and your presidency coincided with debates around rebranding and modernizing. What do you think it most needs to do to become more relevant to younger architects?
It needs to, first of all, it needs to revamp the education system, because it's a 1950s system that we are in. And when we talked about AI and things moving fast, that the whole idea of doing a 10-year course to be just a graduate, I don't think might be a thing of the 1950s. So we need to understand how we can give folks the grounding and the knowledge in the quickest time available so that they can then go out into the world and, like I said, collect and create this spider's web of a career.
I heard you reflect on your time as president.
Yeah.
6 months on, what still nags you?
What nags me? There was this one campaign for the city architects in the UK that I wasn't able to get off the ground yet when I was in office, because it was only 2 years, and things like policies like that take some time to get researched and understand where our position is and what we need to do to get it off the ground. So I wish I had some more time to sink my teeth into that and get that campaign running. But apart from that, I think it was a very enjoyable time. It was an eye-opening experience. It really told me and suggested to me that, if you put your head down and put your mind to something, by and large, you can get it done.
You used the word yet earlier, which suggests to me that you still have an interest in perhaps trying to affect that change, or at least be involved in some way going forwards.
Yes.
So is that something that appeals and you think might be realistic?
Perhaps, yeah. I'm not discounting it, yes. But I have other personal things, ambitions to achieve in the interim. But when the right, it's all about time. When the right time comes up, I will be there for sure.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me.
No, thanks for joining me. Thanks for having me on, Mark. It was a pleasure having a conversation.
No problem at all. I'll be in touch soon, okay?
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Cheers. All the best.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.